In this episode, we'll talk about how to achieve and set realistic academic goals for your learner. Homeschooling really lends itself to being able to really fine-tune the academic goals for your child. I'll explain how you do that. Welcome to This Is Homeschooling. I'm your host, Blair Lee. I'd like to tell you what I mean by realistic academic goals. There are really three different parts that you need to consider. The first are those you should set goals that are really a page width above where your child is. These are going to be achievable, and these are going to be goals that will help your child move along, and that can take some finesse and thought on your part. The second component is those goals that what do you think everyone should learn? What do you think is the knowledge that every person should have in order to be a well-learned person who can negotiate the world that your children are growing into? And those you get to decide. Yay, because you're in charge of their education. The third thing are the goals that will help your child achieve their dreams. Now, you might think, but my child's dreams are going to change. That's okay. By helping your child get some learning around things that they're dreaming of becoming when they grow up, really helps your children see learning as purposeful. There's a reason that you're learning. So when learning becomes purposeful for some kids, you'll get more buy-in, and that will help your children realize and achieve their goals to be a page width above, and it will help them to learn the things that you feel every person should know. Articulating the specific learning tasks that your child should be working on is really beneficial in a day-to-day sense. One of the things that can happen for in a learning situation is that kids can really get overwhelmed. You see the big picture because you have a lot more experience of what kids should be working on, and so you sort of put too many goals. You start to expect learning to happen in this big holistic sense, and you want to step back and think, wait, what are the one or two things, or if there's 10 things that you think my child could be working on, all of these, pick 2. Don't pick 10. And then scaffold them with learning. So you need to have a little bit of work, and then you need to look at then you need to evaluate personally, do a personal evaluative diagnostic, and decide what are the couple of things that should be worked on next. Or, for example, you get to something and you think, you know what everyone should know? Just as an aside, one of my grandsons is working on this PEMDAS, parentheses. And I took one look at what he was working on. He was over here doing homework, and I said, oh, let me talk to you about how you want to do this. And I wrote PEMDAS on his math paper, and then I went to every single problem and said, what do you do first? Now, this might seem really basic. My husband was like, what? But he wasn't consistent until the end with saying always parentheses. So it's this sort of structured approach to learning where there's a lot of things you can be working on, but let's choose 1 or 2. And then let's check to see if the child knows it. And don't get frustrated, and stick with it as they're learning it. My grandson's coming over here again today, and guess what? In math, we're going to be working on PEMDAS. Again, I'm going to work with that until he's got it in his brain, and that is the approach that he always uses. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only way to approach something, but because I understood the goal, I understood that what would help him move forward, and I limited it. And then I checked for learning. That, in a nutshell, is how you can scaffold to help someone achieve the goals. Actually, the story about my grandson gives a little bit of information about how you can figure out some of those goals. Sometimes it's really driven by the curriculum that you're using. Other things like writing can be way more complicated. Math is a great one to give an example because it's fairly straightforward, but something like writing can be more complicated, and that is why it is so important that you limit what you're having your child work on. I'm going to say, let's say you've got your child working on handwriting and you've got your child working on spelling. Then those are the only things you're working on. If they start writing, you're going to focus on handwriting and you're going to focus on spelling of what they're writing. But if you decide that what you want to work on is sentence construction, let one of the other ones go. Don't worry about the spelling then. Don't worry about the handwriting then. A child's brain and an adult brain too. Remember, cognitive load. A child's brain can only handle so much. And that's the key thing when we talk about achieving realistic academic goals. Realistic goals are a limited number of goals, and in order to achieve them, to be successful, and to make your child feel successful with their learning, you want to really limit what they're working on. My grandson, I didn't just have him working on one thing. I didn't just have him working on PEMDAS. Then I had him, when he solved what was in the parentheses, I had him write it above. And then I had him cover up the parentheses. Parentheses were giving him just his brain. He was kind of like, now what do I do with the parentheses? I'm like, you got rid of the parentheses. He had about 30 problems to work on. It took 15 to 18 before he was solid. But because it was really limited in a narrow scope, and I was right there, and I kept, every time I saw him hesitate, I would, say, what are we going to do next? In that way, you are helping them create pathways, neural pathways, for how they're going to solve those problems when you're not sitting there. And you are right there to be very proud of them and to celebrate their successes with them. Another part of achieving realistic academic goals has to do with that celebration when they achieve those goals. Let your children see how proud you are, and make sure you use language with them about I'm sure you're very proud of yourself, because of course being proud of yourself in those situations is incredibly important when using a growth mindset. A question that I get from parents a lot is, how do you talk to your child about realistic academic goals? And honestly, you just talk to them. Kids will have these, I want to be an astronaut. Okay, let's talk about the steps to get there. Some kids, you just give it to them and say, this is what you're going to do. This is what we're working on. Grandson in question, he does really well with, this is what we're working on. He's not all that in. By the time you start with the why, he's like, can I just get to what I'm supposed to be doing? He's a very task-oriented person. But the best case scenario is really when you have kids who talk to you about academic goals. And this is where you really understanding what you're going to be working on can be so helpful. I actually sent out a text message to the rest of the family and said, hey, if you don't know what PEMDAS is and you're working with Dylan with math, shoot me a text. Because there's a group of us. My grandkids go to different houses during the week. So make sure that everybody's on the same page about the realistic academic goals that you're going to be working on, and so that you know what they are, you've got them articulated, you're able to talk to your child, and if they say, but I want to do this, talk to them about the steps that it takes to get to do that. And come up with a plan with them. Sit down and plan how you're going to get there. That can be powerful. Some of these things you might not think about, but it's kind of powerful to share with your child how learning actually happens, how this incremental body of skills that a person amasses comes together to be able to realize learning outcomes that can lead to profound abilities and understandings. If you're working with multiples, and I know a lot of you are, you might have different academic goals for your children, or you might decide that everyone should be working on the same academic goals. If you choose to have your children working on the same academic goals, you're going to need to be really thoughtful that it is fair to each individual. This is where if each child is working on a couple of different academic goals, make sure that your children know what they're working on. Hey, so we're going to be focused on this, and go from child to child. If you've ever watched teachers in a classroom, how they'll go from one child to the next child, they're looking at very specific things that have to do with each child. You're not going to have a child you're not going to ask the same things of an emergent reader that you would of a child that's reading a couple grade levels ahead, for example. So that sort of personalized attention while they're working can make them feel really good about what they're doing, especially if you give them some positive feedback and targeted feedback as they're working. In that way, you can scaffold even with multiples. So I hope this helps you set realistic academic goals for your child and achieve them. If you have any questions, comments, you're struggling to figure this section out, how to set goals, hey, put something in the comments. That's what I'm here for. I am happy to help you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the notification bell. See you next time.